today's World Insight, a closer look at China's unique path to security and prosperity in the eyes of a longtime China hand, Yale Law School's Professor Stephen Roach and Li Cheng from the University of Hong Kong. Deep insights from the Street Talk Forum at the recent Understanding China conference in Guangzhou. How does China's ascent sit with the United States? And what will it take to break the ice on strained relations?
Never end up like what happened in the last Cold War because China is different.
It was just what we needed and that everything is fine.
Is they have a lot to report to both of all of you about China-U.S. relations. What incremental steps do you think that should happen and very likely to happen following that from both sides that would help us to gradually, at least in the short term?
Even incremental things, it's very, very difficult. So we cannot imagine the fundamental change. But the stabilize. So that's supposed to do. No one should be realistically thinking that fundamentally change. But this should provide the floor, not to continue to deteriorate, falling down. Should not be a free fall, and should avoid the military conflict. So the mechanism, mill-to-mill dialogue, the economic one China policy on the administration perspective, and the discussion about the AI governance, these all become important. More is the environmental change in the Abu Dhabi's meeting, particularly Biden administration is for climate change effort. So these kind of things can build some of confidence. Very importantly, people-to-people exchanges. It's extremely important. Education exchanges. So I'm a little bit worried about the Republican Party when, if they come to power in 2024, these things will be all in jeopardy because most people in the Republican Party do not believe climate change, and they also think that the China's threat is the all societal threat. So therefore, to stop exchanges is very much on their agenda.
All right.
So that's the background.
The best thing that both sides can do, and you came really close to it, Cheng, is strengthen themselves from within.
Yeah.
When you feel vulnerable from any perspective, then the fear, as you pointed out correctly, takes over. And the U.S. economy, despite a strong number in the third quarter of this year, is much, much weaker than it was during the first Cold War, number one. And I'm sorry, all my friends out here in China, your economy is much, much weaker than it has been at any point in the last 40 years. And so I think both nations should focus on strengthening their economics, and they will not have the need to lash out at one another.
Focus on what they can do on their own economies. Mr. Li.
But the irony is that at the current in the world affairs, we can ask which country put the economy above the security. You hardly find any major power or any important countries really put security ahead of the economy.
What does ahead mean? So it's very, how can we characterize it?
Do you think decoupling, relocation, and also this kind of self-hurting economic policies, on the part of the United States and also look at Europe. Europe depends on China in many ways. I mean, they just abandon all these policies, stop the trade, the agreement. Is that the reflects that obsessed with security issues? With this kind of binary thinking?
We call it de-risking, you know?
De-risking.
Quote,
So many
unquote.
countries should de-risk, not just about China. And the point is that, again, do you really think the current administration is a pro-economy in the U.S.? And so again, this is not. I think they should really return to economy, and also I think the Chinese leadership should emphasize economic development. This is what I call the 反其道而行之, because China can maintain stability. Why not put the economy back to its importance? I mean, as before.
The 20th Party Congress mentioned national security far more than anybody expected.
Well, you look at the Ambassador Li Cheng's speech. He said that the Taiwan issue is the core of China's interest. But you put China in the corner, then they have to prepare war in that scenario. But also there's a lot of risk factors. Chinese leadership is more risk aware than any other country. The financial, many other things. Now, I'm not saying that that's absolutely right, but that's a reality. Now, it's the same reality. I want to defend U.S. policymakers, including the Congress people.
So you can see.
If you put yourself in the American position, you're a congressman, do you think that they should worry about China? Think about that. I think you will be the same if you're American, you work in the Congress to see China ever growing power.
You see the discussion on the stage, it totally shows this is a moving progress. The discussion about what we know about each other, you know, whether we know it 100% or we are thinking about it all the time, no matter which signal is being sent from which side, we try to digest it and try to put it into the overall assessment of what is going on between the two countries. I think this is a vivid crystallization of that. Having said that, though, I still want to come back to some of the realistic issues that we need to handle right now. Since we're talking about economic and trade, let me ask you, Professor Roach, what is the priority of American business community? Is it scoring political correctness back at home? Or is it seeking global development for the benefits of a business? This seems to be quite a dilemma.
It's shifted. Historically, American companies, especially multinationals, are focused on boosting earnings increasingly through efficiency enhancements enabled by the development of China-centric supply chains. That's been the model. But now it's being challenged by the politicians. And so in every corporate boardroom that I'm familiar with in the United States, there are discussions about supply chain diversification away from China. Not because of economics. The economics still make sense. It's because of, and it's not just political correctness, they are fearful of political consequences if they remain committed to China. And they're being brought in front of congressional committees to testify and explain themselves, and they don't like to do that.
Well, I would say that the U.S. put more emphasis on these security things than Chinese leaders.
Now, we have seen over the past months efforts by China, whether it is governmental side or the private sector, for example, different expos try to show China's open to the world. For example, the Import Expo, our largest ever, being held earlier this year, and the latest Global Supply Chain Expo. These are some of the incremental steps China believes it takes to show to the rest of the world, including to American business community, about what China can do in order to make sure that it is not going to be a decoupled world. Dr. Li, how much do you see these kind of incremental messages and steps will be digested by the other side or by the other sides?
Well, I think that China should do more in this area, should be bolder, should really make a very serious effort. I certainly welcome China now have the visa waiver for 6 countries. I think that the fact that China need to address the issue why so many foreigners fear to come to China. Of course, there's a misunderstanding. But on the other hand, I think I'm a little bit worried. All these steps are in the right direction, but too little, too slow, and may not, regain the confidence. So I think that a great effort should be made, both domestic confidence and foreign confidence of China. I know that's hard because China's economic slowdown is not just attributed to government policy, attributed to many, many factors. So you need to address all these issues and simultaneously, but at the same time, particularly to help the small business and the private sector. Now, I understand this dilemma with the property bubble, with property development, right? Certainly, it's a double-edged situation. I fully understand that. And also that the stock market is not coming back is also hurt people. But China make efforts. Xi Jinping even went to the stock exchanges, went to Yiwu, but still, again, I think my view is should be even more bold steps should be made. But on the other hand, I fully understand. I think that the international environment is not so conducive. But my suggestion is that first we should understand why foreign countries, particularly the United States, the EU, perceive China in a wrong way. We should fix that problem. But on the other hand, I fully agree with Steve, to make yourself better is crucial.
The so-called tech war has gained some momentum in the Western media's coverage about China-U.S. relations. Whether that is a phrase reflecting the reality is debatable. Having said that, though, the development of AI in recent years, particularly with ChatGPT, well known to everyone, has been quite fast. Where do you think all the latest development and the urgency for policy alignment, at least discussion between the two sides, is having its mixed impact on the current realities of discussion? Mr. Roach, you go first this.
There are 2 aspects of this, Tian. One is AI governance. What can this technology do that could damage the welfare of individual nation states or the world? And then there are even deeper questions regarding the ethics and morality. The other issue is the United States is trying to stop China from developing AI by sanctions on advanced semiconductors and the types of chips that NVIDIA makes that are essential to AI progress. And this is a really unfortunate aspect of the tech war. If we were able to come to a joint agreement on AI governance, which you seem to think is coming, then that would provide some relief on the advanced semiconductor sanctions on rapid AI-enabled processing.
Both of you mentioned Dr. Henry Kissinger. And that certainly many believe is an important crystallization of the wisdom of strategists in dealing with both crisis and important twists and turns of history. Meanwhile, you also see increasing people-to-people interactions between China and the United States, let's just say over the past few months. To many of our Chinese friends sitting here, they are familiar with the stories of Philadelphia Orchestra that was earlier, back in the 1970s, made historic trip to China and now making his trip once again to China this year. Also about the American pilots, the so-called Flying Tigers. So you see both about visions and leadership and also grassroots. By the way, we also see interactions among the local governments. For example, with the California Governor Newsom's visit to China recently, how much will these two directions take to meet?
I think you're grasping for a good story, with all due respect. There are 350 American students today studying in China. 350. You can almost put them in this room. That's embarrassing. There's no Fulbright program between the United States and China. The constraints for NGOs to operate in China are still under severe pressure. Having said that, there's nothing
Meanwhile,
but
the American
opportunity.
governments have also scrapped off some of the scholarship programs in China.
Yeah, there's nothing but upside for these to improve. But to characterize it right now, the level of people-to-people engagement is encouraging, I think, is a gross exaggeration. You also asked about Henry Kissinger. He's a very controversial person in the United States. I was fortunate enough in my career to have spent a fair amount of time with him over the years, and I've always benefited tremendously from his insights and counsel. But what he personified, which is what you said, is a strategic approach to foreign affairs and policy that is glaringly absent in the United States right now. I think, if anything, China is probably more wedded to thinking strategically about foreign affairs than the counterparts in Washington are right now. The level of expertise in the U.S. government about the Chinese economy, the Chinese structure, the Chinese system, and its values, I think, is extremely weak. And I dare say, that was a view that Henry Kissinger used to share with me as well. And he's one man, an important man, but the fact that there are not a whole generation of Kissinger-like acolytes operating in policy positions in the United States, not just with respect to China, but with respect to dealing with other geostrategic issues around the world, that is a real shortfall for the United States.
To add what Steve said, not only 350 Americans study in China, but also only 28,000 American college students register Chinese language. 28,000 college students study Chinese. I mean, in China, I think it's 200 million people in the elementary school, high school, and the university, and the recent graduates speak English. So that's tell you a gap, right? U.S.-China relations could be driven by G2G, government to government, or for the last few decades by B2B, business community to business community. This is what Chinese call the 压舱石 or driver, right? But now has been challenged because American middle class, labor, working class think there's only benefit from Wall Street, wrongly or rightly. So that's why President Biden's policy to lift the tariff did not resonate well. So therefore, he never adopted that policy. But now move to P2P. Among the P2P, I think the think tanks, university-based think tanks, or the cultural groups, sports, and etc. They can play a very, very important role. Why? Because this is echo what I observe. Most Americans, in my 38 years experience in the United States, they love Chinese. The same things that my fellow Chinese, I think they are usually very pro-US in many ways, because America transformed China for several generations with educational exchanges, with other things. Because the sad truth is that the people should are grateful in the US, but the people thought, they only benefit from China, which is not true. So that's current situation. But on the other hand, I think we should re-emphasize all these areas. This is the right strategy, because human nature will not change, because these are still, even people in the US Congress, I think they're hawkish on China, but we should understand their position. They are also decent people, capable people. Why they got that idea? My point is sooner or later, people will change. But don't expect they will change immediately. It will take time. But during that period, I think prevent a war or major military conflict is crucial. During that period, continue to promote, maintain this kind of educational exchanges.
I just want to challenge you on that. I mean, what's going to change in the U.S.? You just think someday, all of a sudden, American government's going to wake up and say, oh, gee, we should like China. We used to like China. Let's do that again. I mean, something has got to happen to really make a difference in reshaping the political.
Steve, I see
what is that thing?
I see a point. I see a point. But let me give you an example. Ronald Reagan visited Russia, I think in 1980. I watched that on TV. Then he came back. He had a press conference. He told Americans that he found the Russian people, they smile, they laugh, they are human beings. Then remember Helen Thomas, the old lady, the dean of the press corps, Thomas Helens. She stand up. He said, President, let's imagine you did not go to Russia this last week. You went there in 1970s, 60s, 50s. You will find the Russian people, they smile, they laugh, they are humans. Then Reagan said, no, they have changed. You did not get my joke? So that's tell you, sometimes take time. People will realize. And it's not so easy, but that's irony. That's a great question that Helen Thomas posed. It's so important. I think that this kind of concept change, it happened. Because why? It's no alternative. I don't buy the argument. America is always number one. They will not let another party to share, to be the, someone said G2 or whatever. And, but I think what's the alternative? Alternative is a war. Alternative is you are marginalized, rather than China marginalized. So I think that if we're based on rational thinking, sooner or later will change. But at the moment, it will not.
But the thing is, whether that's the only choice. Either it is black or white, or we have other choices.
Well, I actually, Stephen Roy, Ambassador Stephen Roy, is very close to Kissinger. I think he said in one of the recent meetings, he said for America, Taiwan, a war with China over Taiwan should not be an option. I think for everyone, a war over Taiwan should not be an option.
We are here understanding China, but said very clearly by many who spoke this morning, it is not just about understanding China. It's also about understanding the dramatic changes of the world. So what do you advise, both as an educator and as someone who has been in both cultures and beyond, for many of our young audience sitting here? We particularly want to express our appreciation for their participation.
I have always heard the statement of we are living in extraordinarily, unprecedentedly challenging times with developments that we have not seen in 100 years. There's no question that climate change is unique. There's no question that the AI threat is not unique. But there's always something out there that feels existential to our sense of the future. So I think this has become too convenient an excuse. It's one that I hear all the time from the government in this country of, poor China, we're having to deal with, unprecedentedly challenging global times. Get over it. That's the way it is. Be tough about it. And go back to what we said earlier. The best way to deal with external environments that seem unprecedented is to build your own strength and resilience that will put you in a position to deal with the challenging, difficult times that are out there. So I think we're guilty of using that to some extent as an excuse rather than as an incentive to rebuild our strength from within.
Well, not only about the guts, I guess also important is the means to deal with it. Is it by decoupling? Or is it by wars? Or is it by the rhetorics of Cold Wars? I guess those questions also worth asking. Not only the goals, but also the means.
Well, for all of us, I think nothing is more important than peace. And, but now we raise that issue because some countries in a domestic civil war, like Myanmar, like Sudan, like some other countries. So I think it's very much real. So stake is so high, I think that we should be on the right side of history and to really avoid this kind of conflict. How to do it? Empathy, understanding, mutual respect, all these things. Sounds like Steve will laugh. I don't know what you laugh. It is high. It is difficult. It sounds like a slogan, but that's so real because our life will be terribly, terribly affected.
I guess we need to call for all these important human natures.
Yeah.
And at the same time, the common sense. May I call it a straight talk? A straight talk. So thank you so much for both of you for this wonderful discussion. I think a lot of the questions I asked do not have answers yet. None of us have. And that is why it is important that we are keen on discussing them once and again and try to seek for answers with our common sense and good human nature.
Sometimes we even don't know whether we ask the right questions.
That's true.
Yeah.
The questions should also be evolved. They better have better questions.
Well, let me just say one thing. I do interviews like this all the time, all over the world, and there's no one who asks tougher and better questions than you. So thank you for sharing this afternoon with us.
This is also a footnote. Steve and I remember I gave a talk 11 years ago at Yale. Then you wrote it down. You said this, you said this, you said this. At that time, I was very pessimistic about China. Remember, 11 years ago.
I remember it. I put it in one of my books.
You are right. I was wrong. But now we changed trading places. You become so pessimistic. I become so optimistic. I don't know which one will be wrong.
I
But I really enjoy, debating, exchanging notes with my dear friend Steve Roach. Yeah. Sure.
I really appreciate the qualities of scholars. Thank you so much. 谢谢. Stephen Roach, Li Cheng, thank you. And thank you everyone. 谢谢.